word. Okay, so Haftarah is, of course, a reading from the book of prophets, the books of prophets, that bears some relationship to the Torah portion of the week. It was something that was instituted during an era when Jews were not allowed to read Torah publicly, so they started reading from the prophets instead as a way to sort of get around that decree. And then when they were allowed to start reading Torah again, most communities just read both. You read the Torah portion first and then the Haftarah after. It sounds like half Torah, but it actually comes from the root of addition. It's the additional reading. Just like sometimes there's an extra aliyah. In some communities, there is always an extra aliyah at the end of the Torah portion called maftir. That's the same root, haftarah, maftir, additional. So this week's Torah portion is BeShallach from Exodus. That is not correct, is it?
I think it is.
There we go. Exodus 13:17. My Safari had it scrolled up. But yes, Exodus 13:17. And it mostly is the Song of the Sea. It's the Israelites are leaving Egypt. They get to the sea. They get to the water's edge, and they realize Pharaoh has changed his mind again, and the Egyptian army is bearing down on them from behind, and they're not sure what are they going to do. They've kind of reached a dead end. And then Pharaoh puts his staff in the water, and the sea splits to the walls of water, and the Israelites are able to walk through on dry land, and they all spontaneously burst into song, into the same song simultaneously, and that's part of the miracle as well. And Miriam shakes her timbrel. So that's the Torah portion, and the Haftarah is the Song of Deborah. So the Haftarah tells of sort of a funny story. I love this, as I said, it's one of my favorite relationships between Haftarah and Torah because it's Shabbat Shira. I love music. I love that they're both about women singing, more or less. But the Song of Deborah is mostly about how great Deborah is. Deborah and the man. So it's from Judges 4. Deborah and Barak, who is like the main warrior that she summons to defeat the Philistines. But the actual hero of the story is Yael, who drove a tent pole through the temple of the general, the enemy general, and she's like not mentioned in this song at all. So or she gets very little play, but she's a real hero. But anyway, I do like that that there's singing in both, and there's women heroes, whether it's the hero is Deborah or Yael. They're both great. So I love that. I love this Shabbat. I was gonna open up this Torah study by telling you that I found some very rare and ancient footage of the Israelites leaving Egypt, and then play you the scene from Prince of Egypt. But I realized it doesn't actually match up. I love that song. I love that movie. But they are singing as they are leaving Goshen, and then all of the clips I found on YouTube, they end at the end of the song as they approach the sea, before the sea splits. And I think they continue singing, or the music continues as they cross the sea on dry land. But all of the lines that are used in the Prince of Egypt song that come directly from the Song of the Sea have already happened by then. So that's incorrect. And also the scene with the water walls is beautiful. And so I was very disappointed that the song, that all of the video clips cut off before you see those. So that plan went out the window, but you should still go watch the movie. We're still going to sing that song tomorrow night in our Shabbat Shira service. So there you go. So that's this week's Torah and Haftarah. Does anybody have any place in particular they want to start our discussion? Any questions or verses to hone in on? Some other things I love about this parsha, in the Torah scroll itself, the Song of the Sea is written like, I don't know how to describe it or how to find a page to show you, but it's written funky so that it looks like the sea splitting. There's like a line and a big gap and a line, and then the next line is in the middle between those two, like there's gaps on the side, so it like alternates. It's very cool the way it's written out, and that also helps. It's one of the things that help on Simchat Torah when we're unrolling the whole Torah and I'm going through and pointing out what's happening where. That's a good marker because you can see it like from afar, like that's the Song of the Sea right there. helps find your place when you're looking at the whole Torah rolled out. So I love that. It's one of the things that there's so much artistry that has gone into creating our Torahs as a whole, beyond the stories themselves, that I think sometimes we take for granted, especially when our main tools are things like Sefaria, which I do think is a very important and democratizing tool, but then you don't get to see the cool calligraphy and design work of the scroll. Another thing is the famous midrash of Nachshon comes from this Torah portion. It's one of those midrashim that becomes so prolific that some people think they are in the Torah themselves. Nachshon is mentioned at some point earlier on when we're like learning about Moses and Aaron's lineages. Nachshon is Aaron's brother-in-law. But that's all we actually know about him from the Torah itself. That's the only mention of him, is like once or twice he comes up like as, in relation to Aaron as his wife's brother. I don't think we even get to know Aaron's wife's name. Just like, by the way, her brother's name is Nachshon. But there's a midrash that when we get to the sea, and Moses is kind of standing there for a minute, like, I don't know what to do, which that part is also in the Torah. It says, Moses is standing there like, I don't know what to do. And he asks God for help. And God's like, why are you talking to me? Put your staff in the water. Like, your staff has done all these other miracles. Just do it. And acts like that should be obvious to Moses. So Moses puts his staff in his mouth. But the midrash is in that moment where Moses is asking God for help, Nachshon just starts walking in, and he walks all the way into the water up to where his nose, like up until the point where he can't breathe anymore. And then the sea splits, and that it is due to his faith and his courage and his commitment to this liberation, that is what merits the sea splitting and everybody else getting to walk through on dry land. So those are some other things I love about this parsha. Am I going to talk the whole hour? Okay, let's see. Yeah.
I don't know if this will come through or not.
Yeah.
Is that what you were talking about?
That is what I was talking about. Look how cool that looks. Thank you, Dave.
Welcome. That's on page 78 of my tikkun, back from when I had my bar mitzvah a couple of years back.
1 or 2.
Amazing.
Yeah, 60.
I had a
Uh,
question about
yeah, go ahead.
something.
Yeah.
There's the part in the story where the Israelites are directed to eat the bitter plant that grows on the ground from the morning dew, and the name of what they call it, it starts with the M.
Manna.
Yeah, manna. I took it as like something like moss. What is there any is that a real something, or do we have an interpretation of what kind of plant food that was?
Um,
I think they called it
Breadcrumbs.
coriander.
is that in this week's Parsha? I thought that's later.
Maybe.
Oh wait, no, here we go. And the
Yeah, it
Israelites
is.
ate manna. Okay.
They described it as like frost and like very fine is the way it was described.
Yeah. The like flat cakes. Yeah, the midrash around it. So no, we don't really know what it was. The midrash around it is that, it was divinely given. It's not a naturally occurring plant. It's, manna from heaven is the phrase that's used. And it tasted as like it tasted differently to each person. They say like it every person tasted their own favorite thing as they as they ate it. It only turns bitter or turns bad. There's a is what is that also here? It says it tasted like wafers and honey, tasted
Yeah.
delicious. But
I didn't-
there's
I'm sorry.
something about it if they're greedy, and God says like I'll provide more for you every day, just take what you need for this day, but then they try to like hoard it, and then the next day it's rotten and has maggots in it. So
Right.
that might be where you got that it was rotten or bitter, but when it's fresh, it's delicious. And then as Joel points out, there is also the issue of the bitter waters, which again, no, the ordeal of the bitter water was a trap. But even before that, there's like the lake of Marah or something here in Exodus where
Mhm.
again, because they complain too much.
I'll say.
And they are greedy, and I don't know, greedy is a hard word to use, but it's never enough. Whatever God provides for them, they still feel the need to like hoard, and it's, and it's never enough. So the waters turn bitter, and then they're like, "Ugh, I don't want to drink this anymore."
Is this where Jewish mother guilt comes in?
But also at Marah, isn't that where God shows Moses a tree and he puts that in the water and then the waters are sweet?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I read. Yeah.
Hold on. So
That's
got to be toward the end of the Parsha, right? So the Parsha ends 17:16.
this
I'm
was
in 17:3 where it talks about the waters.
if you go to 15:23, that tells you they could not drink of the waters of Marah, for they were bitter.
Yeah. That's why it was named Marah.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
And moreover,
as it tells you very directly. Yeah, there we go. So then wait, so what waters are we talking about in 17? Let's look at that. Is this this is where God tells Moses to hit the rock with the rod, setting a dangerous precedent, because then later God tells Moses to talk to the rock, and Moses hits it again, and then he's not allowed into the whole promised land. Sucks for Moses. Yes, Joel.
For Brandy, did you mean the manna or did you mean the bitter waters?
I was thinking of what I in my mind was thinking of as like this plant that grew on the ground. I was thinking of it as like moss, and I thought it described it as coriander, and that's so maybe I was convoluting.
Physically, it says it looks like coriander.
Yeah.
Not that it would taste like coriander. Although I don't find coriander bitter either. I like coriander.
I was referring to the plant.
Yeah, so that's manna. It's not even quite, it comes from the ground, but it doesn't grow from the ground. It like collects there. So it's not even really a plant. It's so ephemeral.
I see.
Yeah, Joel.
So Brandy, you're almost correct. In the Hebrew, it's called manna. And in English, we call it manna. That may be a little bit of the confusion. So in the Hebrew, man. And I did look this up a few years ago, and actually there is, as Rabbi Goldstein just told us, this particular manna or man actually contains some galactoside. Galactoside is a type of sugar. And in fact, so like the whole thing is not really too far off base. So there is a possibility. As far as the bitter waters go, just quickly, I want to throw out, we're saying, okay, they came across this whole lake and waters are better. They couldn't drink it. So they threw in this special tree and suddenly everything good. So what comes to mind is what we're facing right now with the vaccines. And it's the idea that in homeopathy, it's a branch of medicine. The question is, can a small, infinitesimally small quantity of something actually cure like a whole great big virus problem? And it's the same idea. Sometimes you can inject a very small attenuated virus into the body, and sure enough, it stimulates the body to develop these antibodies. And so pretty soon you're immune. Same idea here. So here is this water, and it's of course it's not a historical account, but as far as folklore, it's kind of cool. So it really could be that it could be really telling us that small attenuated virus can be used to induce an antibody response. Just
Thank you.
I like that. Joel also brought up the question of the Red Sea versus the Reed Sea. So this is a point of confusion often. So the Hebrew calls the sea that they cross the Sea of Reeds. Here, let me find the beginning of the parsha where we're going to get that. 13. Wait, I can't find where it calls.
It is
They got to the sea.
13, verse 18.
18 is the first time they call it.
But God led the people
Wait.
about through the way of the wilderness of the Reed Sea.
Okay, yeah, there we go. Yam Suf, yeah, the Reed Sea. Now it frequently then gets changed to the Red Sea. Like even here in Safaria in the Rashi, it says again Yam Suf in Hebrew, and then it says to the Red Sea in English. But Suf means
Reed.
where the reeds grow.
Yeah.
It's the same words from the beginning of the Exodus story, from the beginning of Exodus, when it says, Yocheved put Moses in the basket of reeds, Bisof, or Suf, sorry. Sof is a different word. I think, so my understanding, and I haven't seen most rabbinic writings I've seen that have to deal with this English misnomer just say, like, wasn't the Red Sea, stop calling it that. I think the confusion comes from that we don't know where the Sea of Reeds is, or like what sea that is, versus we do know where the Red Sea is. That is a sea that we still identify as such to this day. And it does in fact, like geographically, it makes sense that that would be the sea that they would cross, given that you can get from Egypt directly into Israel via like the Sinai, but we know that they enter Israel from the other side, from the Jordan. So it would make sense that they go down south first, cross the Red Sea, come into Aqaba. I don't know if Aqaba was called that yet, but the port city of Jordan, and then come back around up to Jericho. So it could be that there's a smaller sea somewhere in that area that they crossed instead. It could be that the Red Sea used to be called the Reed Sea in biblical times. We just don't really know. And the fact that they sound similar has contributed to this distinction. But the Hebrew very much does not say the Red Sea. So yes. Yeah, Joel.
There's a very nice hint in the Hebrew. I've been wondering about this for a while, and how it works is in the complete Torah, we chant the Torah, and we chant it with a special verse for every word. Sometimes there's two musical tones on one word, and something very interesting. The end of every single verse, maybe except one or two, the melody is called Sof Pasuk. Sof Pasuk. And it's a very special melody that tells us it's the end of the verse. It's the edge of the verse. When I heard it was the edge of the verse, I said, aha, Yam Suf, which is pretty much the same word, means the edge of the sea. If it's at the edge of the sea, this is where the reeds will grow. The reeds will not grow in the middle when Charlton Heston puts his arms up. The reeds only grow on the edge. Therefore, unequivocally, Reed Sea is correct and Red Sea is wrong. From the Hebrew. By the way, you don't have to be a Hebrew scholar. If you can just recognize a couple little letters and you read along, it's just well explained. Just recognizing a few simple letters. So simple.
All right, can I ask another question about the seas parting? It was very clear on a couple of occasions that the water spread, in my mind, it was vertically, or the walls of water were vertical, and a part of me wanted to like rationalize or make a real world like way that this could have happened. And I was thinking that this reminded me like of tides, like the tide went down and the people were able to pass. Is there some consensus about like this, or is this debated, or what do people have to say about that topic?
I mean, I think mostly people just accept that this is it's a miracle. It's you know, it's biblical. We don't have to take it so literally. Of course, there are times when tides can do that, besides just like going out, but they can separate. I remember there's a I used to spend a lot of time in Cape Cod, way at the tip of the Cape. And when you get to the edge of Provincetown, to like to the ocean, to where there's no more land, there's still an extra little curve of the peninsula. You know, if you think of Massachusetts, it's shaped like this, right? This is the Cape, and then like, oh, the last little finger sticking way out is called Long Point. And when it's high tide, the breakwater is completely covered, and you can't get to Long Point unless you have a boat. But when it's low tide, you can walk across if you have the right shoes. It does get very muddy. You will lose your flip-flops. But if you have good sturdy sandals, you can walk across it. So it's, and then there's still like the bay on your, well, depending on which way you're going, the bay on one side and the ocean on the other, or the harbor on one side and the ocean on the other. So it's possible. And Joel said something about the volcano at Santorini, and people do, you know, cite things like that for like Noah's flood. There are records of like massive flooding in the between the Tigris and the Euphrates around the time that like our ancestors would have been writing Noah's flood, and there are other flood stories that kind of correspond with that time frame. So there are there are natural things that could explain it, but I don't know that it's that useful to try to pinpoint it like that. Like, I think it's cool to think about those prospects. Like we talked, I don't know, I think we talked 2 weeks ago about the potential like chain reactions of things that could have accounted for the plagues, the red algae that killed all the fish, that killed all the frogs, that you know, whatever. But you know, I don't know that that's what makes this story important, whether or not it was historically accurate.
Mhm.
There's the classic story of the little boy who's picked up from Sunday school, and he's telling his father what he learned. And he said they got to the Red Sea, and Moses said everybody build pontoons, and they rowed their pontoons across, got to the other side, sank them all. Then Moses called the Israeli Air Force in, and they bombed the Egyptians. And his father said, "Excuse me, is that what your teacher said?" And the little boy says, "No, Dad, but if I told you what he said, you'd never believe me." So, old story from my childhood. But yes, my rabbi said the same thing as you did, Rabbi Liz, that we are not necessarily meant to take this as this literally happened, but certainly something miraculous did happen, that an enslaved people left and found their way to freedom, and all kinds of things happened. They should never have been able to leave. They should never have survived, but somehow they did. And that's the miracle he took from it. My father was a chemical engineer, and my father found a whole bunch of explanations for how these various miracles happen, including some fairly arcane geological stuff. his view was the waters actually naturally receded every day at a certain time. And so you could walk through the mud, slog through,
Right.
but when the water started coming back through, it essentially turned into something resembling quicksand. And if you
Right.
were anything heavier than feet, you weren't going to make it. So chariots and horses and whatnot, they were doomed.
And I find in places like that with breakwaters that appear and disappear, when the tide comes in, it comes in fast. Like if you're halfway across and the tide comes in, like get ready to swim the rest of the way because you're not going to make it. So yeah, so I totally buy that that's a possibility.
So Brandy, I struggle too with, did this really happen? How did it happen? Oh yeah, that's right. We don't have to know that it happened or not to get value from what we're reading. And I go back and forth, and it's kind of a comfort, I think, in a way, although sometimes I think it's kind of stepping over something, but kind of a comfort to be able to say, well, you know, we don't have to really know to understand what
the purpose is.
Thank you. To get out of this what we need.
Right. There's a difference between historical accuracy and capital T truth. That they don't need to be both, to be one or the other.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Let's see. These are stories to be kept alive. This can be mashal, meaning metaphor. Yes, indeed, Joel. A lot of it can be understood metaphorically, including, maybe that's a good segue to the end of our parsha. After they are safely on the other side, and the Egyptians have drowned, and they've got their manna and their quail and their water and everything. Then there is altercation with Amalek. And there's a few things in this story that are worth picking apart a little bit. So the first thing is, again, this like God's involvement, but not directly. Like God will make miracles happen through Moses's hand, but Moses still has to lift his hand to bring them about. So anytime Moses holds up his rod, the Israelites prevail. When he's tired and he drops his hands, Amalek prevails. So Aaron and Hur come and stand on either side and hold his arms up so that they don't get tired. And he's able to keep it up so that the Israelites win. So I think that's, worth mentioning, the power of cooperation, of knowing when to let somebody else hold you up, of knowing when somebody needs to be held up. There's a lot going on there. Joshua, meanwhile, is the one leading the charge. He's clearly a great warrior. This is our prelude to understanding why he becomes Moses's successor and is the main, conqueror of the promised land later. And then we're told to always remember to forget Amalek. And that just tickles me.
There'll
So
always be an Amalek.
Right. There will always be an Amalek. And we say, like, may their name be blotted out. but at the same time, we can't forget, right? So, and I actually do, like, it sounds funny in like in this context, remember to forget them. But I do understand that, like, a little bit, we see in modern contexts, there are some people whose evil is so great that we can't blot out their names either. Like, we're never going to forget Hitler's name or Stalin's name. But there are other, slightly smaller scale mass killers who we want to remember the names of their victims and uplift their legacies without necessarily remembering the names of the people that committed the atrocities. And I don't know, there's two people that come to mind for me immediately, and unfortunately I do still remember their names very clearly. And don't think that I could necessarily tell you all the names of their victims, or maybe any of the names of their victims. But I understand when people say, like, let's not keep talking about this person. Let's talk about the, like, bigger issue of toxic masculinity and white supremacy that drove them to commit these crimes. And so I can appreciate that that tension of, like, never forget, but also let's not glorify, let's not risk turning these people into, like, some kind of martyrs for people who do think that they did the right thing.
Actually, I don't even think it has to be a tension between the two. I think to me, it makes so much sense saying, be aware, be cautious, but don't give them more weight. Kind of just, if you're walking down the street at night, be aware of your surroundings. That's how I kind of was seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
Yeah.
Joel,
Yeah.
what is emunah? I know I've heard the word, but I'm drawing a blank.
Okay, in this verse, it says his hands were steady. In other words, they were upheld. The problem with emunah is this. I grew up in a Christian environment. Perhaps you did too. Christian country, Christian suburbs. Of course, we were always Jewish. And from the word emunah, we get the word amen. When you say amen after someone toast wine, you're really saying, I affirm. I uphold that. Yes, I'm with you. Another word closely related is the word emet.
I was thinking
what that means?
Truth.
Truth. And I think what we're doing when we're studying, we're trying to ferret out the truth. Okay. Now, when I was growing up, all of my Christian neighbors, the Notzrim, Christianity is totally different. As long as you believe, you're good to go. You're going right to heaven. You can be in the mafia. You can kill 3 guys a week. Okay, the priest comes over and, oh, nope, I believe in our Savior. Okay, no problem, I'm going to heaven. Now, the reason why it's under fire today is I'm hearing from so many people, oh, I love Judaism, but I don't believe in God, whatever. Okay, believe it or not, there is no word in this entire Torah for the word believe. Okay, not emunah. One word, Rabbi, is bitachon, which is about as close as you can come. It means I trust. So in other words, here I am, I'm the beneficiary of the creation of the universe. Guess what? You are too. Modern science tells us we're mostly space. I'm like 92% water. That's like so in air and space. There's electrons, there's all kinds of stuff. So who am I? What am I? Well, the good news is we were all created. It was all set in order. And that's what we're studying. We're studying how this universe came to be. Don't even worry about belief as long as you are upholding. And yes, I am upholding what I read in Torah. Even better, I came upon the realization that the creation of the universe is really upholding me. I don't deserve it. I didn't do anything to deserve it. Still, the creator of the universe is upholding my existence. That's how I'm here. And it can disappear in 1 second.
Yeah.
How about, do you want, Rabbi, do you want to mention about the Lamed Vavniks? Are you into that?
Am I into that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very mystical conception. So, we as we've discovered, I'm pretty ambivalent about mysticism. But the Lamed Vavniks, the concept is that there are 32 people in the world at any given time that are so righteous that it is for their merit the world continues to exist. And they're anonymous. We never know who they are. They can be, it can shift, whatever, but just this idea that as long as there continue to be at least 32 people in the world at any given moment that are acting completely righteously, they uphold the world. Yeah. And Lamed Vav, of course, also is the root for heart. So they are the heart of the universe. And that's not, it comes from the gematria of it, the 32. Lamed is 30, or not 32, 36. Vav is 6.
Tell us about spirituality. I love this direction. What's your feeling about it?
About spirituality?
Yes.
Like in general?
Yes.
I think, well, so as you said, Judaism is really not a religion of belief, it's a religion of action. So as Reform Jews, spirituality is only as good as it fuels us. It must compel us to act. It must give us inner peace, when the action is hard. And if it's not doing those things, it's empty and meaningless, basically. And so that's why as Reform Jews, we put less emphasis on ritual observance, in that, like, those mitzvot are all good and well, but if they don't elevate your soul, if they don't compel you to, if they don't give you the strong foundation you need to give your life to righteousness and justice and tikkun olam, then they're not serving you. Like kashrut should be your doorway into ethical eating. Shomer Shabbat should be your doorway into mindfulness of your energy consumption, as well as mindfulness of your own need for self-care and recharging yourself so you don't burn out. Praying every week or every day or 3 times a day should be a way to, meditate and center yourself. If it's just lip service, then what are you doing? So that's my feeling as a Reform Jew. Now, some people will say that because Judaism is a religion of action and not really belief, it doesn't matter if those mitzvot fortify your spirituality. It doesn't matter what you believe they're doing. You have to do them anyway, because that's what Judaism is. You do. You don't believe. You don't feel. You do. And those are both valid ways of looking at basically the same concept, So, yeah. Joel.
I see you as a very spiritual person. I will base it upon this. When you're reading something, you're explaining something from Torah, I see the supreme joy that comes across your face. You're a very spiritual person. Whatever you
You
do,
love
you
this
don't
stuff.
do, you have a strong spirit, and it was put inside of you.
I'll say
I love what I
amen.
do. You what? Amen.
Amen to that.
Amen.
This brings something else to mind. I think we have a few more minutes, right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I thought I read in here as it was going through like the Passover ritual, I want to call it.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of the mitzvot of challah, of like, I think they made a plate for God. In the same way, when you're making challah, you take off a piece for God. And to kind of add to what everyone was talking about these mitzvot, is that some of the ones that I've read about, some of these mitzvot that I've read about, the praying at certain times of the day and the challah are the ones that I'm familiar with. And now this one of making the plate for God during Passover. But the point is to, even in so doing these things, you create a reminder. That's what I would call it in this case, a reminder that God is always here. He's always here to be helpful, and we are here to do good things for God. And so if we remind ourselves of these things at different points of the day, whether it's through praying or making the plate for God or giving him a piece of our bread, then that is the reason we are doing these mitzvot, as opposed to like just doing them because we're told to do them. We're doing these to find a way. And for me, I've taken it as like, this is the way I'm going to teach my children to, remember to do these things. You're going to remember to be thankful to God because we're going to make a plate for him and we're going to give him bread and we're going to wake up in the morning and say thank you, things like that. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
lovely.
Yeah, so much about our mitzvot are so much about the like ritual observance is about reminding us of other like bigger picture things, like the commandment to not shave the corners of your head. Why Orthodox men have the payas, or the to leave the corners of your garments, so the tzitzi, the fringes. That really comes back to the commandment to leave the four corners of your field untouched for the poor to come and glean with dignity. So if that's your, like, the way you ground yourself every day with your clothes or your hair or whatever, to remind yourself to give to your local food pantry, and most of us don't have farms anymore, but to do these other actions, like, that's what it's all about. Those commandments come in the same part of the Torah. They're connected. So yes, I think that's very much what this is all about. And we do, because we don't have the temple anymore, we don't offer the lamb, we don't have a sacrifice to God in a physical way, but we have our Seder plate. We have our cup for Elijah. We have other ways of symbolizing during our Passover Seder that still that root back to these segments of Torah that remind us that God is with us in our Seder plate. In our Seder table. Yeah. I do kind of also like the idea of setting in a whole extra place setting besides just the wine glass, of like having a portion of the meal. So, I don't know. I think there's something really nice to that now that I'm thinking about it. This idea of setting aside a plate for God or Elijah or whatever, and then when you open your door and say, "Let all who are hungry come and eat," you literally have a place set.
Yeah. I like that too.
Any other last thoughts on our parsha, our haftarah, songs, songs of liberation and triumph? One of the best divrei Torah on this I ever experienced was from Rabbi Amichai Lau Levi, who is he's the founder of Lab Shul and Storytelling in New York. And so he does this his way of giving divrei Torah is like, he doesn't just like give a sermon. It's very interactive. It's very like dramatic. And so he also, this was in a room full of rabbis. It was at the Trua convening. So like he knew he had a certain amount of buy-in from everyone there. But he said like, we're at the sea. Like he really set the scene for us and was like, what is your song of liberation? What are you going to sing as we cross the sea? And the first few people started singing like, I don't know, like their favorite tunes for Micha Mocha or whatever. And he was like, no, boring, been done. What is your song for liberation? And it was just amazing. Then like, as people kind of like, warmed up a little bit, the songs they came up with, I don't remember now what they were necessarily, but there was a lot of like 60s peacenik songs, power to the people
Overcome.
kind of, kind of stuff.
I was there.
Yeah. So,
Joel
well, so
was
were a
there.
lot of the people in that room. I tend to be the youngest youngest person at various rabbi convenings. But yeah, so I don't know. That's something to think about as we conclude today and go into Shabbat Shira tomorrow. What is your song of liberation and triumph?
Good idea.
Yep.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
any
Thank you,
other
Deborah.
last thoughts before we close?
Thank you, Brandy. Brought up some
You're
good
welcome.
points.
Thank you
all
all.
of you. Delightful as always.
Have a wonderful week.
Indeed.
You as well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.